The Magicians Podcast is brought to you in proud association with the Magic Circle, Alakazam Magic and Gigio.
I don't need this programme. Paul and I have discussed it. He said, if I'm not happy, I can walk. You know, we don't care if we don't get paid and you'll have no programme. But I have never been treated like this in my life. I'm not going to be treated like that now.
Yo, it's my life, my time, my rights, my rhymes, my grind, my struggle, hustle, sweat in my blood too. I'm ready to smell fear, I smell a lot. My competitors fled scared, cause they smelled I was hot. I want it all, excess, the sex, much success, stress us. I want it all, no less, so come on.
You're listening to the Magicians Podcast, free every Friday on iTunes, Podbean and Stitcher. Welcome to the show, my friends. My name is Richard Young. I am your host. I sincerely appreciate you tuning in to this very special episode with Debbie McGee. Those of you who have followed the podcast for a while will recall the 2-hour episode I released last year with Paul Daniels. It's episode 44 on the feed. It's the longest episode I've ever released, and if you've never listened to it, I would urge you to go and do so as soon as possible. It was a very special episode at the time I released it, but of course now it's even more special because it ended up being one of the final interviews which Paul ever did specifically for magicians. He is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, the greatest magician this country has ever produced. And almost exactly 1 year to the day later, I returned to the house to record this interview with Debbie, which you are about to listen to. I made a decision before I arrived not to ask Debbie about the final few weeks of Paul's life. She's done those interviews. They're on the internet for you to go and look at if you're interested in that period of time. I would recommend you watch her appearance on Loose Women. It's on YouTube. It's very easy to find. And she also did a few interviews with some of the national newspapers. This interview, which you are about to listen to, I'm very proud to say, is about Debbie and her extraordinary life. So sit back, relax, and enjoy over an hour in the company with the First Lady of Magic. That sounds good, doesn't it? I hope that sticks. The lovely Debbie McGee. So it's always nice to meet another world-class broadcast journalist. I am here with Debbie McGee from BBC Radio Berkshire. Hello, Debbie.
Well, it sounds awfully grand, that, doesn't it? Broadcast journalist, but I suppose we both are.
Yes, we are. Absolutely. We're in the broadcast industry, so, you know.
This is Broadcasting House.
Absolutely. It's a very beautiful house, as everybody knows. It's incredible. A lovely day. We're very lucky today. Nice weather as well. It's a little bit windy, though, so we can't record outside because it's too windy, basically. You'll hear the wind.
You get a lot of going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I wanted to have you on the show for a long time. In fact, when I did the episode with Paul last year, immediately I said, I'd love to have Debbie on. Do you think she'd do it? And so it's just a big honour for me to have you on the podcast, so thank you for doing it. I'd like the whole story today, though, if that's okay.
Fire away.
Because you've got, as far as I can tell, an absolutely unique perspective on our industry, because you've done so many incredible things. You've been close to so many incredible things. You perform yourself as well, and of course you were close to the best magician this country's ever produced as well. So, but let's go right back to the start. Obviously, you were a dancer first of all. Grew up in Kingston upon Thames. Is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Kingston upon Thames.
And you're the daughter of Patrick and Lillian.
That's right.
That's correct. And I believe you went to dance school at age 7. Is that right?
Yeah, about age 7, I went to a very tiny dancing school near where I lived. When I was just sort of coming up to 11 and we used to enter competitions, my dad used to come and watch the competitions, and was a very wise person, said, well, if you're thinking of doing this as a career, you need to go to a better dancing school. So I've been watching the competitions to see which is the dancing school that's winning the most, cups and medals. And so at 11, I changed to a different dancing school that was, a different league, I will say. So I was the worst at a brilliant dancing school at the age of 11. And then I kind of overtook most of my friends by the age of 13 there. So when I was 16, they said, my body was the right shape and proportion for the Royal Ballet School, that I should audition for the Royal Ballet School. Now, they audition thousands of people a year, and, my year for the girls, they take about 30 or something like that a year. So, and it's quite a rigorous thing. You go through various auditions. Your bones are measured by an X-ray, and you have to be absolutely equal of everything. I mean, my friend didn't get in, although she was a fantastic dancer, because her right hip was 1/8 of an inch higher than her left hip.
Wow.
So everything has to be absolutely perfect. So I was very lucky that I did get in, but I loved it, and I had a fantastic time there, and the training is amazing, but I just wanted to be in show business. I didn't really mind what I did.
Oh.
So that's sort of where it began.
So you mentioned that your dad had said, you want to do it as a career. So what age did you say, I want to be a dancer? Was that like 11 or 12 years old?
Yeah, I think when I first started at 7, the reason my mum and dad sent me to a dancing school was because I used to copy all the Hollywood musicals on TV, like lots of little girls do. So they sent me to a dancing school, and I obviously showed some talent there. And then when I went to this other school that was much better, the teachers that were training me there had all danced at a very high level, either in the West End. I mean, one of them danced at Princess Grace and Prince Rainier of Monaco's wedding. Wow. And things. I had a really fantastic all-round training. But even then, I just wanted to be in show business. You know, I loved the glamour.
Yeah, so when you graduated, is it a little bit like being a magician? Do you effectively become a jobbing dancer? Are you looking for contracts and work various different places? And I understand you landed a contract abroad. We'll get to that in a minute. And you had to come back because there was a problem in the country. But what was the early stages of, once you graduate, where do you find your first work as a dancer?
Well, actually, before I'd left the Royal Ballet School, when you're at the Royal Ballet School, because the training is like training an athlete, you are not allowed to even take another dancing class with a different teacher in the holidays, because it might untrain the muscle that they've been training.
Oh, wow.
But I was a bit naughty in that I didn't do class with any other teachers, but I did some professional work in commercial theatre, and I did pantos in my Christmas holidays and a couple of short summer seasons, and fitted it in. And I can remember going on stage and thinking, God, if one of my teachers see me, that's it, I'll get expelled. So I had some experience of different shows then. And then when I was in my final year of the Royal Ballet School, they advise you to go and what they call take class with companies around the world. And so that's why I did a trip all around Europe with my friend, I think in the Easter holidays, which your poor parents have to fund. And we did classes in the Royal Ballet de Wallonie in Belgium and all over the place to try and get a job.
That's amazing. So I think when you were 19, you end up in, is it Tehran?
Yes, yeah.
And you're working out there, and then there's like a revolution that happens, and you had to flee the country. Can you tell us that story? It sounds amazing.
Yeah, I don't. If anyone's seen the film Argo, that is exactly what I lived through. But Argo was made probably a year after I left. But exactly how they got hidden in an apartment and going to try, you couldn't go out, things were going on, people getting beaten up if you were white, they thought you were American, and it was all linked to the Jimmy Carter thing. And then I had saved a lot of money because I've always had a business head. And when I was in the final year of the Royal Ballet School, I did all these auditions, and one of them was for the National Ballet of Iran, Iranian National Ballet. They came to London to audition. Well, they were offering the most money, so that's where I went, and I thought it would be exciting to go and live there, which it was. I loved it. And so I had this plan that I would stay for 3 years and save enough money to come back and buy an apartment block. And then if I was in show business, I would have an income even if I wasn't working. But of course, 6 months after I arrived, the Ayatollah came back and there was the revolution. And as I said, watch Argo, that's what I went through. I'd saved a lot of money so I could get a plane ticket out, but it was the day that they were closing the airport. And I got stuck exactly like in the movie and ran across the tarmac onto the plane and escaped, literally.
Wow.
Yeah. So came back to England, needed a job, All the ballet companies in England and Scotland were full at that time. So I auditioned for the Delphont organisation, who put on all the summer seasons. So there were about 1,500 girls at this audition, and they chose, I think there was about 100 of us or something. And so it was you 10 are with Des O'Connor, this 8 are with Ross Abbott, this whatever were with Little and Large, Cannon and Ball. So if you're younger, you won't know who I'm talking about, but these were big stars in the 80s, and this was 1979. And my lot got put with Paul Daniels, and I had a clue what he did or who he was or anything.
You've been told you're off to Great Yarmouth. That's
Great
where it
Yarmouth,
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've also heard you mention previously that you did say to your friends, "Oh, I hate magic."
I did.
As
Yeah.
well.
I'm really sorry, magicians, but the only magic I'd seen was a couple of things on Royal Gala performances with Dove magicians who were probably good, but they weren't my scene as a younger teenager, and so it put me off it. I would always go and make a cup of tea.
Do you remember the very first time you met Paul?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We were rehearsing in a studio in Shepherd's Bush, which was a converted church hall, and Paul and I were both punctual people, so we were both early, and so I was actually sitting on the wall outside this Una Billings studio, and Paul came up with a big box of tricks, and I remember there was the dotted, is it leopard silk with the dots on, and you shake it and they're off.
Yeah.
And then they would appear in a change bag. So he had one of those in there and a few other little tricks that we were going to do in rehearsals. And it was, the dancers started rehearsals, and this was about the 4th day of the first week. And so Paul came up, and we were both so early, the studio wasn't even open. So we started joking and talking to each other. Yeah, so that's the very first time I met him.
So you spend, the summer season runs through the months, and then I know you left Paul and you went to work in Panto that Christmas, and you did a few other things after the summer season ended. Is that correct?
Yeah, the first summer season was Great Yarmouth, and then after that, through the choreographer, I was offered his following summer season, which was Bournemouth, which didn't start until the following May of 1980. So, and in those first 3 years of working with Paul, in between times, I was a backing dancer for ABBA, for the Four Tops. I did tours with a guy that had a huge orchestra called James Last. There was a very famous singer at that time called Grace Kennedy in about 82 or 83 or something. I did loads of TV work and stuff with her abroad because I was with a dance group called The Second Generation, and so we went all over the world dancing. And then so I went back and did Bournemouth summer season with Paul, and of course in the very first show in Great Yarmouth he watched rehearsals and chose 4 of us to help with different tricks, but we weren't doing illusions. It was standing either side of the magic square and moving the numbers or carrying a trick on. And the mouth coil where you go off one side and come on the other. Mm-hmm. So I was involved in all of that the first year. And so the same with the Bournemouth summer show. And in Bournemouth we actually did a few other bigger things. And then while we were doing the Bournemouth summer season in 1980, the big bosses of Delphonts had offered Paul the Prince of Wales Theatre from that autumn. So they came and asked 2 of us, myself and another girl, to audition for the London choreographer, because it was going to be a different choreographer, and just attend the open auditions. And so both of us got then the Prince of Wales show along with 8 other girls that they'd auditioned, and went into the Prince of Wales Theatre. I think we started rehearsing as soon as we finished the Bournemouth summer show.
So when did romance blossom? Was it 79? Was it 80? Do you remember when that sort of happened?
When we first met, and Paul describes me of, he used to read some rude book that had a little figure, a little mannequin, where the girl was kind of half sitting, half lying with one leg out and one bent up, like dancers always sit like that. And I was sitting like that on the wall, and I reminded him of this little figure. I think the book was called Forum. It was a magazine or something he used to get. And so he used to tell people when the first image of me was, that's what it reminded him of. And there was an instant chemistry when we met. And we made each other laugh immediately. And so from then, it was just, there was something there, but Paul just thought I was far too young. And when we first met, he did have another girlfriend. So we had quite a few years of him really being very scared of committing, and both went out with other people, and I would chase after him and he'd kind of keep me at arm's length, and in the end I'd get fed up because he'd have about 10 other girlfriends at the same time. So I had various other boyfriends, and then when I was 28, and I don't know what it was, but I think he thought I was older, that the press wouldn't be so cruel, because there was a 20-year age gap. I also had become a lot more independent, because although I was doing the TV series and things with Paul then and doing lots of other work, I was still doing other work on my own. I always have done. So by then I'd bought my own flat. I wouldn't let him help me buy it or anything.
I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
He wanted to help you buy your first flat and you said no. And you think, I've heard you say in another interview, you think that was the point when he started taking you a bit more seriously, because he knew that you were a genuine, strong, independent sort of woman. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think it was really, I wasn't after his money as well.
Yeah.
Not that I think he ever thought that, but probably it was in the back of his head. I was so much younger than him. It was much more to do with the age gap. But no, I think, I wouldn't, like, I remember him saying, well, just let me pay for the insurance. And I said, no, this is mine. So I think that he suddenly realised I was getting a bit older. I wasn't going to wait around forever for him either.
Yeah.
And I was getting loads of other work then. And he came to see me. I was doing panto at playing Maid Marian in Babes Wood at the Theatre Royal in Norwich. And he surprised me, actually. It's a lovely story. In the second act of that particular pantomime, the two babes got put in a box, like a Doctor Who thing. And as Maid Marian, and the baddies sneaked them out the back. It wasn't an illusion. It was, all to do with the plot. And as Maid Marian, I would open the door and go, oh my goodness, the babes have gone. And Paul had told me that he was actually at the Magic Hands convention in Germany, which he used to go to every January, and that he was out of the country for 4 days. But in fact, he hadn't gone. He came up to Norwich. He was in cahoots with my stage manager. He had hidden in this box and for an hour and a half to play the joke on me. I'd actually stood in the wings for ages talking, leaning on it at one point. And then when I opened the box on stage, out walked Paul.
That's amazing.
And apparently I jumped 6 feet in the air, and I'm a real giggler anyway, so I completely went. I couldn't get my lines out. Robin Hood had to run on with his men and save the scene, and Paul just went, oh, I'm in the wrong place, and walked off or something. But that's the sort of guy he was. He was always playing jokes on me all our life.
I'm interested to know, from your point of view, as your lives, you two became this famous couple, and you've done really, really well. Does that, when you get to that sort of, do you become a little bit suspicious of people? Do you think, no?
No, not any more than you do when you're not.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think you see, if you're the sort of person that sees through people anyway, you do.
Ah, I see.
Some people take you unawares, but you that's it, that's life, isn't it? But I don't think it, I would hate to think that you would go through life being suspicious like that. I think Paul and I are both people, and we've just always got to know people. If we like you, we like you, and if we don't, we don't. And in his situation, having said that it was money, it was much, much more my age.
Yes.
I don't think, because Paul wasn't really a person that even worried about money. He much preferred playing with his tricks. He just wanted to know he had enough to buy the next trick. Although it looks like he was materialistic because we lived in a big house, and at one, for a time he loved the trappings of being famous, of buying nice cars and things, because we both came from working class families. You do that.
You sort of grow out of that though, don't you?
Yeah, and then in later
phase.
years he said to me, why on earth did I own a Ferrari and so many Bentleys? He said, I wasted so much money on cars.
Yeah.
And so he really wasn't bothered.
One of my biggest regrets when I came here last time and interviewed Paul was we sort of skipped over the West End run a little bit. It was incredible. 14 months, I think it ran for. What are your memories of that run? Like you said, you were...
Well, of course, it was before Paul and I were married.
Yes.
So I was just a West End dancer. And it was such a happy time. I mean, for him it was, and I think it was when he was really first becoming very well known, and he must have been exhausted, but he, you know, even up until the end, Paul had incredible stamina and energy. And at that time that we were there, he was doing a radio show for Radio 2 for 6 months of it. I think it was his second TV series, first or second TV series, and 2 shows a night, and we got Sundays off. And on Sundays, he was doing charity work or recording something else, or quite often his radio show, I think he recorded 4 of those on a Sunday. You know, so and then he'd do 2 shows and go out to dinner most nights as well, you know, after the show. I don't know how he kept up with it all, but he always did. His whole life, he always had that energy. It was, it was a really special time. For me as a dancer, I loved all the dance routines that we did in the show. So I just loved it. And of course, I was helping with quite a lot of the magic. And it was the fact that, A, you were in the West End. It's so exciting. I still get excited going into the West End now. But also, loads of famous people come and watch you. You know, if you're in a West End show, you're peeping through from side stage before the show, and people say, oh, look, and, you know, we have movie stars and whatever, you know, sitting on the 4th row right in the middle.
Yeah.
And things like that. And they were people at that age, you know, I had never got to meet anyone famous. A few people that I'd worked with, but, you know, not movie stars. So it was ever so exciting.
And I believe that's Fisher. John Fisher saw you in the West End show, and then he asked you to consider doing the TV show the year after. Is that correct? Have I got the timeline right there?
I'd actually, what happened, it is quite, it wasn't funny, but it is funny. I actually auditioned for Paul's director for, I think, the first series. But I was having, I had 2 teeth capped, you know when you have a thing?
Yes.
And they put temporary caps on that weren't right until the new ones came. And they were awful. And I'm sure that's why I didn't get the job, because I went to meet with his director and I must have looked like Dracula's daughter, and I never got the job because Paul wasn't involved, and, you know, we weren't going out then. I was just a dancer on the show. But I think that happened first, and I got that through my agent. And then the following year, I think it was John Fisher and a different director had come to see the Prince of Wales show, and then said, would I like to do the series? So that's because Paul wouldn't, in those days, he wouldn't get involved in booking you or a girlfriend for the show.
Yeah. I'm so excited to talk to you about this bit, actually, the TV show. As I mentioned when I arrived, that I spent last night watching Paul Daniels' magic show on YouTube. I had a great evening in by myself watching it, and you did so many incredible things. And also, I'm really interested to hear your perspective of what it's like to do all of these incredible tricks. First of all, because I'm going around the houses, let me ask one direct question. Of all the illusions you did over the years with Paul, all the stuff, all the different things, do you personally have a favourite? Is there something you remember fondly, a trick or a thing that you did on the TV show that's the happiest memory for you? Or
No, I just loved it all.
Oh, that's nice.
I really did, and I think that he would say the same probably.
Yeah.
It was just the whole time we were there, I just loved every minute of it. So I can't really think. There were things that I probably enjoyed more. I loved doing all the Christmas specials that we did, especially when there was music. But no, I just loved all of it.
Yeah. And one thing I did notice was when the final series, it became secrets, didn't it?
Yes.
And they sort of changed the format. Paul talked about that he didn't really like how it all turned out, but there was a part of it which I found really interesting, which was that there was some dancers, and you were dancing at the start of every episode as well. It was a great bit of the show, actually. It had a lot of energy and stuff like that. How did that bit come about? Were you involved with that decision, or did somebody else make a decision to put a dance group at the start of the show?
I think at that time, especially as I was much younger, I hadn't danced for about 15 years or something, but I always loved it. I mean, dance was always my first love, and anything to do with music. So when they talked about having dancers, you know, we had team meetings and we'd throw in ideas and they'd get thrown out. So other people in the team who'd seen me dance before always pushed, and Graham Reed particularly, one of the consultants, oh yeah, we've got to get Debbie dancing. So once they said they were having dancers, it was just kind of second nature that I would be involved. And for me, it was fantastic. And Brian Rogers was the choreographer, and I'd worked for Brian years before. I mean, he was a really big choreographer all through the 80s. So it was really special for me to be able to do that, and I just loved it. Yeah.
Did you get to choose the other dancers in the group?
No, Brian chose those.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to talk to you about one particular illusion which I shared with our listeners on our Facebook page a few months ago. Somebody recently uploaded Secrets to YouTube, and in the very first episode of the series, at the end of the show, there's a levitation effect with you, and it's an incredibly clever trick because it's using multiple methods, and it just shows Paul and Ali's work at their best.
Paul's, I'd say, and that's not
Paul?
putting
Okay.
Ali down. Paul would say this as well, and we loved Ali. He was like a part of our family, but Ali, his biggest thing, his biggest advantage of being a consultant was sitting in the director's box and saying, you can't cut there, because it'll look like a camera trick, and we never ever did camera tricks. Paul always said that was his first thing that he was so important doing. And the second thing, that Ali's real knowledge was making things with cardboard and plastic bands, and Ali would sit up all night to make something for the next day's recording. But it was Paul's knowledge of illusions and things that most of the methods came from Paul, or he knew of them from years ago, and he'd say to Barry Murray, can you go and research that tonight, because I know that it's in this book, that book and that book,
right,
and let's have a look at those. And things like that levitation you're talking about, the multiple methods, that was all down to Paul.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sometimes along the way it was Gil Leaney, the lovely Gil Leaney. Paul had unbelievable respect for Gil. He said Gil's knowledge of magic was better than anybody else on the team, including Paul's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I've not heard that before.
Gil had worked with the great Lyle and things. Paul always listened to Gil.
I want to just get, magicians never think about this, but it's something I'm really interested in, is the reality is you are on that levitation, and it is really you. It's not an Azra form, if I'm correct with the method of that. So you really do go up 30 feet or so. What's that like, Debbie? You're putting a lot of trust in the stage crew and the way the thing's been built, aren't you, to lay on something like that? Over the years, you're doing all these different illusions. Have there been any sort of things like that where you've worried a little bit about, is this definitely safe or anything like that?
No, Paul always made sure, Paul's knowledge of everything, including safely, was just enormous. And so he always made sure if we were doing anything that needed something that might be unsafe, that we had the experts dealing with it. So if we had to bring in an outside company to do something, we had the best in the world, so that nothing could go wrong. But he also, for every trick we did, Paul had worked out in his head, if that goes wrong, we'll do this, da-da-da-da. So where safety was concerned, he actually would do that as well. So I had slight moments of nerves, but usually that was because we hadn't had enough rehearsal. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just winging it, literally. But no, I can't think of anything where I was worried about it being dangerous, because we'd always talked about what the safety aspect was. I mean, we did one week, the special effects team hadn't finished the illusion we were meant to be doing, and so we had a backup stock illusion that they brought in from America, and because Paul wouldn't just do it as is, he decided after the dress rehearsal that he would put a lit torch through it. It was one of those where the girls goes into the box, and a circular tube was put through and a square tube, that type of thing, a bit like geometrics, so it had holes through it. So when a live audience, the live take, or being recorded, he put these torches through, and a cinder from the torch landed on the plastic that was like a covering inside the box. So it was creating toxic smoke.
Oh, wow.
But we always had a password that if I was in trouble, that I would say it. But we had a live orchestra in the studio in those days, playing very loudly.
Oh, he couldn't hear.
So at first he didn't hear me, so I had to shout it quite loudly. So he did so, but what he didn't stop performing. He pulled the tubes out and got me out, and I smiled, and then a curtain came in, so I was coughing and spluttering. And that went out. It's in the recording of that particular show.
Oh, really?
They got their take, but I was coughing and spluttering afterwards, and I was okay. And another time was when we did the artist's dream, and when the crew had cut the trap I went down, they'd left a rusty huge bolt sticking upwards. So when I jumped with my shins underneath me, like, lifting your feet to your bottom, as I landed down on the floor, the bolt was between me and the floor, and there was meant to be a mattress there. I landed on it, it stabbed into my shin.
Ouch.
And I was like in a big white long ballet dress with lots of net. So I laid under that stage in agony till they'd finished the take. And I was covered in blood and got rushed to hospital. I've still got the scar to prove it. They stitched my leg up. And so it's quite funny because you're in the middle of a series. So I've got a bandaged shin. And I can remember the following week, I was dressed as a schoolgirl in one of the things we were doing, and then there's this great big bandage on my shin.
Oh.
There we go.
You mentioned the geometric illusion. That's the one with the square, the triangle, and the circle.
Yeah.
I know that Paul liked touring with that illusion. Is that the one that you did the most over the years? That one? I thought it might be. Or is there another one that you think you did more?
No, probably. But we both liked it. And one of the reasons we liked it is the two versions we did on TV really wasn't the best version. If you'd seen it in later years, and we put it away for years and years and years, and got it back out again a few years ago to take on tour, and we did it for a few corporate things. But what happens is, in the day, and I think to a degree it's true now, although they do seem to do more of magic specials if Dynamo or Darren are doing them, so they probably get a lot more rehearsal. But I think what people didn't realise is, we recorded, say, one year on the Friday and Saturday. The Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, you were in acting rehearsal rooms for the planning meeting of that week's show. And so then we had the weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days. And if we were lucky, we got the props on the Wednesday. On the Thursday, it was the tech run with the crew. And on the Friday, we were in the studio, which was camera rehearsals, lighting rehearsals, and a rehearsal day for the acts. So we didn't get much time on the Friday. And then on the Saturday morning, if we were lucky and the acts had gone smoothly, we could go through our stuff. And then we had the dress rehearsal after lunch, and the audience were recorded in the evening. And the Sunday morning, you were back in the rehearsal room. So you didn't get a chance to develop anything. I mean, you just didn't. So geometrics, we did it for the TV show, as quickly as we could. And I think I got in it the first time on the Thursday, because it had come from America. It wasn't what it looked like in the picture. So Paul's dad rebuilt it and built one around me.
Oh, wow.
So it isn't the one that they sell in the catalogues.
Ah.
Ours was completely different.
In Magic in Magic, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
So when it came, in the pictures, it looked like, wow. But when it came, it was obvious.
Oh.
Or more obvious. So Paul, so we made it look like it was in the picture. So we did it for the TV show, and then we did it on a couple of private events where, because I could do whatever I wanted, I realised in the middle of it, and we were doing a live performance, that I could actually push the swords out and get to them.
I remember that bit of the presentation.
Yeah, so I started, and the first time it ever happened, of course, Paul didn't know what was going on. I realised from his patter, he was facing the audience and bending over, and I was able to push out the sword that was at his bum level and get it. So he laughed and went, oh! So, and he made fun of it because he could ad-lib so easily. So after that, we developed it more and more and more with me pushing the swords out.
I love that illusion, actually. I love Paul's presentation of it, because what he does is he talks through everywhere you could possibly be hiding and then eliminates all of those places. It's a very, very clever presentation. And I remember his last line would always be, and so if that eliminates everywhere, there's only one other possible explanation: Debbie McGee has disappeared completely. It's such a lovely, clever idea, actually. One of my favourites.
The Magicians Podcast brought to you in association with the Magic Circle, the world's premier magical society. Are you ready to join the world's most exclusive magic club? Visit themagiccircle.co.uk to find out more.
Gigi-O, free for 30 days. Be a pro, get Gigi-O.
If you do gigs, you need to get Gigi-O, and that's the website you'll need too. GetGigio.com, where a free 30-day trial awaits you right now. It's a web-based software designed for professional and semi-professional entertainers anywhere in the world. It will save you hours in the office every single week. It generates PDF contracts and invoices. It tracks your payments. It updates the diary on your phone automatically. It allows you to schedule emails to your clients. It is integrated with PayPal, and it even has a venue lookup feature. So if there's venues you visit frequently, you'll be able to just start typing the beginning of it. Gigi-O will realise where you're going and input it straight into your diary that way. All the top professionals are using it. Visit the website right now to read what they all say about it and take that free 30-day trial. The website again, getgigio.com.
Whether you're new to magic or a seasoned professional, Alakazam Magic are here to help. Alakazam have been supplying magic to magicians for well over 20 years. Not only do we carry all the latest and greatest magic tricks, books and DVDs, but we also manufacture one of the finest ranges of magic tricks in the world. The Alakazam name is synonymous with great customer service, educated advice and honesty. So if you're shopping for new magic, make sure you check out our website www.alakazam.co.uk or pay a visit to our fully stocked shop.
When was the decision first made for you to start doing some tricks on the show? I remember watching you with the chef Gary Rose doing the toaster trick and things like that. But when was that decision first made that you would start performing magic yourself in the show?
Well, what happened, at first and for quite a few years, the BBC really always in those days put people into little boxes of your stereotypes. So Paul, being a magician, wouldn't be put into another show doing something else. It works like that in America, and it works like that here now, but it didn't then. And so when I was booked as an assistant, they really felt that the assistant shouldn't talk and should be in the background and be cut out of as many shots as could be. So in the studios, because I'd worked with Paul live for 2-3 years before I started doing the TV shows, we'd already developed this kind of easygoing relationship on stage where I could come on and talk to him. But we'd do that in the studio, but they'd cut it all out. But what happened was, in my first couple of years doing the TV shows, before that he'd used different people every year. And then I joined another girl that had already been on the previous year, Mandy. But I was starting to get a lot of fan mail that they hadn't got. So that's when they started saying, well, should we give Debbie something of her own? And so then they decided to just keep me. And if we needed another assistant, they'd just get one in that particular week. And I was building up quite a big fan base. So that's where it came from, is because I was getting all these fan letters, and the BBC were asking, can we see more of Debbie? It came from that.
Do you actually enjoy performing magic when you do it yourself?
Sometimes. Yeah.
Can you tell us when you do and when you don't?
Yeah, I'm not driven like magicians. Because I think, you're all trickaholics and you love the methods. I've got more like that as I've got older over the years, but I never used to want to know how things worked because I loved enjoying magic. And performing it, you know how it works. Yeah. And it's something to do with that. But In the past 2 or 3 years on tour, I've done a lot more. I mean, last year in the intimate show, I did more than I've ever done. I really enjoyed it. But the year before, I did the rice bowls trick, and I didn't get enough rehearsal, which wasn't Paul's fault because my dad had been very ill. And I learnt that in my kitchen for 2 days before we opened on tour.
It's a messy trick, that, isn't it?
And for the last probably 3 years of tours, anybody that saw that tour in the first 3 nights, it wasn't us at our best, although I'm sure it was an okay show, because things happened in our life that we couldn't rehearse properly. So literally it was going on stage and doing it for the very first time. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago I did the rice bowls. I didn't enjoy it at first, but I had certain nights where I loved it, and the night I loved the best was the night it all went wrong.
Oh, right.
And I got the giggles, and the audience laughed with me, and I had loads of jokes about I was going to get the sack, and all sorts went on, because over the years of performing, because of Paul just telling me, just be yourself, that's what I am on stage. I don't feel any different to what I feel with you here now, which all came from him. It's why he was so successful, because he was always like that.
Yeah.
There wasn't ever any fear, and that's why he was a good magician, because he never got nervous, and there was no fear. Where performing magic, I think, is so hard that I did get nervous if I was doing it myself, until I'd really grasped it. And sometimes I don't think I ever quite got it till nearly the end of the tour, and that's being totally honest. So I did love it on the nights I thought, yeah, you did that well tonight, Deb, but on other nights I think it was really hard work, where when I do other things like my radio show or hosting awards nights, I haven't got to think of the magic, and I just have a ball.
Yeah.
Where performing magic, for me, the concentration is so intense that unless I could do and rehearse, which lots of magicians do, for a couple of years, so it really is mechanical, and therefore I can really develop my patter, I'm not quite so comfortable.
Do you have any tricks in particular that you really enjoy performing? Can I mention one that I thought you did beautifully, which was when I saw you on the last tour, I came to the Banbury show, you did Gypsy Balloon.
Oh, yeah.
You do that beautifully, but are there any tricks that you particularly enjoy performing?
My 2 tricks that I love performing is the Gypsy Balloon, and also, I think I did it in that show at Banbury, I did a card trick to open the second half with the man from the audience.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those 2 are the 2 that I really enjoy doing. The Gypsy Balloon, because I really felt 99.5% of the time I really got the handling how I wanted it and developed it. So I enjoyed that development process and felt completely within my own skin doing it. And the card trick, I just loved the fun I could have with any chat from the audience.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed that. So I didn't ever have one night doing that card trick that I didn't enjoy doing it.
There's an incredibly famous TV clip which you are part of, and sadly the lady behind it died recently, Caroline Aherne, with the famous "What First Attracted You to the Multimillionaire Paul Daniels." Obviously very sad that she passed away recently. What's your memories of that
day?
That day, yeah. May I be so brash to ask, was that all planned? Did you know she was going to ask that? What was the story behind it from your point of view?
When I did the Mrs Merton show, it was her first one.
It's the very first episode, isn't it, of the series?
It was. I don't know if it went out first,
right,
but it was the first series, and so all I was briefed was that everything's tongue-in-cheek, so don't take offence to anything. Now, as we talked earlier, when I met Paul, he wasn't a millionaire, and I actually had quite a lot of money of my own because I've been a very, very successful dancer. I was never ever out of work, and I've always been a saver. So when I went on Mrs Merton's show, I had the most wonderful day. Chris Akabusi and I had been together all day. We flew up together. We had a laugh because we're both gigglers. So much so that I didn't have time to go and change for the show, and it was the winter, it was freezing. And I bought a beautiful dress to wear, But it was really cold, and I was running late because Chris and I had been messing about and joking. So I just thought, I'll just stay in what I've travelled up in. Little did I know it'd probably be my most shown piece of TV, but anyway. And then, so by the time I walked on the set and she said that line, I was so high and up on having had a lovely day that I laughed because I wasn't going to take it seriously, but also Paul wasn't a millionaire. She'd just married a millionaire, Hookie, who played in the band. So I just thought, I don't know, I just felt it was funny.
Yeah.
Nothing else. So often journalists say to me, "Oh, you must have been offended." No, I wasn't. Not even an inkling. All I can remember is how I laughed.
Well, that's a silly thing to say because you're in the business and you're a pro, so of course you understand what it is and how funny it is. So, also a year or so after that, you did the Louis Theroux documentary. I'm really interested. Those documentaries, they look so intrusive in a way. Why did you and Paul agree to do that?
Because I've just started my ballet company,
yes,
and we needed some really good publicity. And what people don't realise is when we did the Louis Theroux programme, all he had done before that was a pilot. So he didn't have any shows going out that you could compare it to. That was the very, very beginning of reality TV. It was before Big Brother and all of that. And so we came from an era of TV where they wanted to make you look your best. There was makeup, there was hair, they made your costumes. You didn't go on set unless you were looking your best or as good as they could make you look. And they weren't trying to catch you out. It wasn't paparazzi TV. You weren't manipulated to look bad. You were manipulated to look good. It's like the old days of Hollywood where even your private life was controlled by them because they wanted you to be what everyone's dream of a life would be. That's what television was like. So when we accepted Louis Theroux, we had no idea that it wasn't just intrusive. It was the fact they were trying to catch you out. The very first morning, they said, we'll be here at 7 o'clock. They got here at 6, so we're going looking through the windows with their camera. If we said you can't go there, that's where they went. Right. So we learned a big lesson doing that. But even Paul purposely wasn't his usual light-hearted self. He played himself down, so we pushed my ballet company.
Yes.
And in fact, it was the year FISM was it in Portugal or somewhere? I know he went abroad with the film crew and I didn't go because they were with us on and off for 4 months, for an hour's programme. And they all went with him and got interviews from magicians from all over America, all saying lovely things about Paul, but they never even showed that. It was a big learning curve that, hey, the world of TV was changing.
Let's talk about Ballet Imaginaire. As you mentioned, it was your ballet company and you were the artistic director and the choreographer, I think, as well. How did that all come about? And that's a big, what's the word? It's a big investment, isn't it, to get a show on the road like that? So how did that all come about? Why did you and Paul decide to do it?
Well, because of my background with the Royal Ballet, I always went to the ballet and I'd been to see a little touring company. And if I'm honest, it wasn't very good. The costumes were a bit tatty and it wasn't, I thought, normal people who are put off ballet by things like this. And also they don't understand the stories and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. So I came home and said to Paul, because I think I'd gone with my mum, I said, I'd seen this company, he said, how was it? And I said, I could do so much better than that. And I said, and you could take a small company, make it look bigger and better, into small theatres for the normal people and do a voiceover so they knew what the hell was going on. And I could design costumes like the Hollywood people design costumes for the movies that are much more glamorous. So he said, well, why don't you? So we sat down and did a business plan and looked into it. And so that's what I did. So the first year I put together a tour and it was 3 clips, 1 act of ballet. So it was Act 2 of Swan Lake, another act from Coppelia, which is a light-hearted ballet, and then I created a ballet of my own and took it out on the road. You
also did a show, Wife Swap, with Vanessa Feltz, and there's some odd bits in it, shall we say. But were you okay with Vanessa and her partner afterwards, or did you become friends afterwards or not? She wrote an article about Paul when he passed, didn't she? Did you read that article?
I did, yeah.
What did you think of that article?
Well, I thought it was lovely. She actually wrote to me as well. Well, wife swap is the only job I ever regretted doing, and that was because I just didn't enjoy it. As I said earlier about Louis Theroux, and learning then that television's changing, and instead of manipulating you to look good, they manipulate all the reality shows now, manipulate you to get the worst out of you. Wife swap was a prime example of that. When they invite you to do the show, you don't realise they've got an agenda. And their agenda for Ben and Vanessa and Paul and I was to make it look like Paul and I sit here every night in our slippers. We live in the country and we never go out. And that Ben and Vanessa go out to a nightclub every night and, really live it up. The reality of it was that we found out afterwards was actually Paul and I, work far more than them, but we go out more than them. So actually it was completely the opposite. They got it completely wrong. But I didn't enjoy the manipulations behind the scenes. And they don't let you go, they didn't let me go to bed till 4 a.m. I had to be up at 6 to do Vanessa's radio show, and so that they wind you up so that you're at your worst, and then they're pushing you of what to say to the person's partner to get them angry so that you argue. In normal circumstances they couldn't have pushed me that far, but it was an unusual circumstance, and I'll be honest about behind the scenes, they were really trying to get me to make Ben look like he was just with Vanessa for her money. They would told me what he had in his bank account. They were feeding me information that I wouldn't use. And they wanted me to be much harder than I actually was with him. And so because I was even then, it was a few years ago, but I'd had a lot of experience. But Ben hadn't. He was very naive, a lovely guy. I actually, at one point, because they don't leave you on your own, but they did. They had a planning meeting. So I got him in his shower. I put the shower on and told him to put his hand over our microphones. And I said, Ben, look, they've got a real agenda for you. They want me to make you look really awful. So and this was one of the things they'd fed me, if I say to you, if you're out at a nightclub and Vanessa's got a headache or wants to go home, come back with me as I say to her, okay, darling, yes, we'll go home. Don't say, she has to ask me 3 times and blah, 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 which is what he actually did on the programme. And I said, they're really trying to make you look bad. I don't want to ask these questions, but they want me to. So anyway, that night we went out to one of the nightclubs we were going to, and one of the producers who'd been really nice to me, because they were all lovely to me, was awful to me. So that night when we got back, I said, can you 2 producers come in the bedroom? I said, look, I don't need this programme. Paul and I have discussed it. He said, if I'm not happy, I can walk. We don't care if we don't get paid and you'll have no programme. But I have never been treated like this in my life. I'm not going to be treated like that now. And she said, well, Ben came to us and told us what you'd said.
Oh, wow.
So after that, I couldn't be nice to him. I had to a degree. Looking back on it now, I didn't have to do what they wanted, but to a degree I had to, because there was nowhere else to go with it, because they manipulated it so you couldn't say anything else. So that's why I regret doing it, because that wasn't me. And afterwards, we had a question about Vanessa and Ben. At first, Vanessa really couldn't understand that it was the programme, it's television, and they manipulating it. But when we met with them afterwards, and we've been okay with them ever since. But she did get us in lots and lots of articles that she did for about 2 years afterwards. But she always respected Paul. I think it was me she didn't like, because Ben had got upset. But, Ben wasn't as successful as the 3 of us. Kept saying things like, I'll tell you how to be famous, Debbie. You and Paul don't go to the right bars and you have to set the paparazzi up and things like that.
Yeah.
And he's really nice. He was just inexperienced.
TV's horrible sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awful. So I don't understand how this happened. It's brilliant because you've been there for nearly 10 years. How did you get a radio show on BBC Radio Berkshire? Where did that come from? It's brilliant. You're on every Sunday morning. There's a gardening hour, which my dad loves, by the way. How did that come about?
Well, Paul used to stand in for in the summer if one of their main presenters went on holiday. And so they just rang me, and it was Henry Kelly had this programme 10 till 1 Monday to Friday. He wanted to go and work on a cruise for 2 weeks, and they just happened to ring up and said, "Are you free? Would you like to come and stand in for Henry?" The only radio I'd done was on Wife Swap, where I didn't get really hard. I had 15 minutes if they told me what to do, and I was thrown in at the deep end for 2 days. That's all I'd ever done. So apart from interviews, obviously. So yes, I went and stood in for Henry for those 2 weeks, and they guided me through. A lovely guy called Anthony Wooten was my producer, told me what to do, and said at 28 minutes past you've got to stop talking and go to the travel, and at 1:30 you do the weather, and and this is how you do it. And so I just did it, and at the end of the 2 weeks they offered me my own show, and I've done it ever since. And
it's a lovely gig, isn't it? It looks like a lovely gig.
And and the gardening hour I did for 2 years. When I first went there, I had quite a few years of just 3 hours of different subjects every half an hour. And then I had a few years where my last hour, I called it my show business sofa. And then I took over the gardening hour as a middle hour, which I loved doing. But now Tony Blackburn left earlier this year, and it was after Paul died actually. They came and asked me if I'd like Tony Blackburn's slot, which is earlier than mine on a Sunday morning, which is only 2 hours. But magicians will like to know this, but I get paid the same as for 3, so we're not going to turn down that, even though I have to get up early on Sundays. So now I have a 2-hour slot, and it's a lot of showbiz related stuff, so I just love it. It goes so quickly.
Something I regret not asking Paul about, as I do when I look back on the interview I did here last year, was I saw you guys at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in, I think it was 2011, forgive me.
11 or 12, 11, yeah.
I remember it was just a terrific show. What was so great about it was because of the audience of the Fringe, there was every generation there, some people who were seeing Paul for the first time. And the show was a big success up there. I remember it was packed the day I saw it. Why did you not go back? I know obviously it's difficult to make money in Edinburgh. Was that part of the reason, or...?
Definitely.
That was it, was it?
We enjoyed it, but we had a great showtime that year. I think it was we finished at 5:45 or something. So we went off and saw everybody else's shows
had the evening
as well.
free.
Yeah.
Best shows.
It was brilliant. But no, Edinburgh is a place to showcase your work. But you can't make money. The people that rent out the venues are the people that make money, unless you're a current name and you get booked in one of the bigger venues and you get a salary. But we did well. I mean, we did make money, but it wasn't anywhere near what we could make doing other work. And we did love it, but it's hard work. And we always like to try different things all the time. So often people said, "Why on earth did you do that?" Well, because it's different to what you normally do. And Edinburgh was one of those things as well.
What I loved about yours and Paul's career in recent years actually was that you just kept going. You were still touring, you were still doing shows. Was there a reason for that, why he kept going?
Because he just loved performing.
Yeah? Did you love it as much as him? You loved being on the road and stuff? Or were there times you said, "Paul, let's do a few less dates"?
Right. Yes, there were definitely times I said, "I don't want to do as many as this." So in the last 3 years, the tours that we did, we were working. We always had 2 months off in the summer, unless there was something we wanted to do, like we went to FISM in Rimini last year, which was fantastic. And we hadn't done a FISM for 20 years or something. Another story for another day.
Okay.
But we would take 2 months off in the summer, go out on our boat, see our friends, see the family, and would not go away. Have a holiday usually in the winter, in January or something. But no, we were doing about, I suppose on average, about 3 nights a week. So that was lovely, you know. And last year's, the Intimate Tour, that was our happiest tour I think we've ever done. And it was just the two of us. We didn't take a tour manager in a van or anyone to sell the programmes or anything. Paul created the show, so it fitted in the back of an estate car. So we just used to keep it in the shed near the back door, put the show in the back of the car the day we went off, and most of the time we drove to the venue and then shared the driving back that night. If we were within 2 hours of home, we always drove back. And if it was a Saturday night and I was doing my radio show on the Sunday, because I had a later slot then, so I didn't have to be in the studio till 10:30, we even a 4-hour drive sometimes. We split the driving on a Saturday night, or he drove and let me sleep, because he could sleep on the Sunday morning. But the intimate tour, we loved that show, and it was very intimate. It was in smaller venues, they were like 300 seaters, most of them. We had a ball last year, and we were taking it back on the road this year. That was our plan, because we loved doing that show, and we sold out everywhere, and it was brilliant.
Well, I saw it in Banbury. It was absolutely packed. Actually, it was great. There's a very famous thing which Paul said to you, which has been said in multiple interviews, and I want to ask you a little bit about it. When he proposed to you, he said to you, "I'm not very good looking. I'm not very tall. But I promise you life will never be boring." He kept his promise, didn't he?
Gosh, certainly did. And as he would have told you as well, that the years went by and I said, please make it boring. Can we have a night in front of the telly? And in fact, it was a magical life. It truly was. And I can remember one night, and I'm not name dropping in any way, because anybody that's met us knows, we just enjoyed every aspect of our life, whether we were having a coffee with someone from our village or, tea with the Queen. We enjoyed it. It didn't matter. But one night we'd been rehearsing all day, and we had to get ready at the BBC rehearsal rooms into our glad rags to go and have drinks at Buckingham Palace. And we got in the car, we got off rehearsals at 5 o'clock instead of later. And we looked at each other, and Paul said, "Are you really bothered about going?" And I said, "No." And we went home and had beans on toast and put our slippers on, and we didn't tell anybody we hadn't gone because we'd sneaked off rehearsals. So we did have moments where, hey, we didn't want to be full on all the time. And I would say probably our happiest times were probably when we were both just here on our own, cuddled up on the sofa.
When I interviewed him, I asked him a question, and I want to ask you the same question, if that's okay. I asked him what he thought your secret was to your long and happy marriage. What's your answer to that question?
That we made each other laugh.
Yeah, it was laughter, was it?
And he would say separate bathrooms. Is that what he said?
Yeah, he says that a lot. Actually, do you know what? And you can go back and listen to it. Do you know one of the things he said, which I thought was really interesting, was he said that it was the fact you two spent a lot of time together, and he said how other relationships, sometimes people go and work in different places, and they go on a business trip or they meet someone at the office. Because you two work together and live together, it meant you were always really close, which I thought was a lovely answer.
Yeah,
actually.
and I think we talked about this as well, because people would say, I couldn't work and live with my partner. But what we said, our relationship, and it was just short of 38 years when Paul died, that we'd known each other. And we were married for almost 28 years. I always said it was because when people can be married for 50 years, but they go to work in opposite directions and leave home at 7:30 in the morning, get home at 7:30 at night, where Paul and I spent 24 hours together all the time, virtually all the time, So therefore, earlier on in our marriage, we got to know each other better and what keeps the other one happy. A relationship is about giving the other person what they need. What do you normally get cross and fall out about? It's when somebody hasn't done something that the other one's expecting.
Yes.
You haven't bought me flowers, darling. I mean, I have a friend, her husband was in show business, and one year, and he never ever bought her flowers. And there was a knock at the door one day, and there was a florist with literally, a huge basket with hundreds, and I mean, it cost £1,000, this bouquet, and of flowers. And he said, "Oh my goodness, who's that from?" And she said, "You." And so he always bought her flowers every Friday after that. But that's what you have to learn about and then you have to grow with each other. And there will be moments where your needs have changed and you have to talk about it, because that's what keeps you happy.
Obviously, you knew Paul better than anybody, and all we ever saw actually was the showman Paul. He was always on, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Even when he was at dinner with someone or whatever. Was there a different side to him? When were there any things that Paul wasn't happy with in life, or was he always just the guy that we saw, the happy, you know?
On the whole, Paul never changed. You're right. He was like that all the time. The real Paul that I knew really was the person that people got to know. Except I think because the media, when he was alive, I will say, because they were nice to him after he died, but on the whole the media always gave Paul a hard time because his TV shows showed him as quite a brash northerner with this, you know, kind of really go for it personality. They always kind of were against him. Jeremy Beadle had the same problem, where the real Paul, if you got to know, was never jealous of anybody else that was successful. He loved it. He loved people getting success or being happy. And with his performance, all he wanted to do was entertain and make people happy. And as a person, he really was a kind person, and in private did an awful lot for magicians' widows that he would never have told anybody about.
Oh, really?
And various other things of people that he didn't know or didn't know very well, but knew they were going through a bad situation. Paul would send someone flowers in hospital or things and never tell anybody. He would, you know, I think people, where he was misconstrued quite a bit, I think, was that people didn't know about that side of him and all his charity work, because he didn't ever talk about it.
Mm. We talked about some of these horrible TV shows earlier where they're trying to portray you in a certain way. I do wonder, I mean, over the years, a lot of newspapers and documentaries tried to dig some dirt on your relationship. They never did they?
No. When
do you... Yeah, well, does that make you feel good?
Yeah,
it should.
Thank you.
Yeah,
no, it does. I think particularly when he died and all the lovely things that people were putting on TV and on Twitter and Facebook and writing to me, you know, it was really made me realise, wow, what we had. Not that I'd ever taken it for granted, but, you know, you really do think that. But he knew what we had as well, which was lovely. And I'm saying about, you know, trying to dig dirt and cracks in our relationship and whatever. When we did the Louis Theroux programme, I heard Louis on Radio 2 a few weeks after we'd done it and it had gone out. And he told the presenter that his executive producer on the last night when Louis came here for dinner had said to him, and he'd been with us for 4 months, you know, go in, find a crack, Louis, you know, you haven't got anything here. And he said, no, I haven't found any, and I like them too much, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, that's sweet.
And he wouldn't do what his producer said, and I really had so much respect for him for saying that, you know, and he never told us. Saying more about Paul is, you know, the thing is with Paul, it was always what you see is what you get. And he didn't talk about people behind their backs. He said, if he didn't like you, he said it to your face. But he wasn't ever an unkind person. And I was particularly moved by what Teller it was Penn, his article in the Magic Circular. I don't know if you've read that.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Because that really defines what was so special about Paul, you know, which isn't a particular thing that magicians want to hear. But it was nothing to do with the magic. It really was the man. And the fact that Teller could say of all the famous people they've had in their dressing room holding court, you know, Paul was the king. And that was true around the world. And if we mixed with the royals and whatever, that he was the same with them as he would be with you or our bin man on a Monday morning.
Yes.
And wanted to make you laugh. And he didn't change.
Yeah.
He never put on airs and graces. He really taught me to be natural.
Yeah.
You know, I'm from Surrey. I'm from where people pretend to be posh, and went to the Royal Ballet School where we had elocution lessons. But I've always had a good sense of humour. My dad was a joker. But when I first worked with Paul, I trained in show business to put on an act because I believed, you know, that's what you should be. And Paul really taught me to just be myself.
Yeah. There's a little thing you mentioned. You mentioned the Magic Circular interview which you did and the Magic Circle in general. One of the things which has crossed my mind is because Paul is widely regarded as the greatest magician this country has ever produced, some of his props are quite important, actually. Have you given any thought to what will happen to some of them?
No, not at the moment.
No? Okay. So what's the future hold for you, Debbie? I think you've got a few things coming up over the next few months. You're keeping busy, aren't you? I think it's fair to say.
I mean, I'm not sure when you're putting your podcast out, but I've just done a few programmes that are going out September, October time, I believe. One of which is a Celebrity Pointless, that game show on BBC Two. I've just done a programme with Brian McFadden from Westlife called Who Does the Dishes for ITV, and it's one of those that goes out in the afternoon. I'm sure eventually it will go out in the evenings as well. And that's where a celebrity has to cook secretly dinner for 4 members of the public. And Brian McFadden was here with me for the day, and then we served the food in the evening with clues. And I'm hiding, watching a monitor. And then they have to try and guess who it is. And if they do, I have to wash the dishes. But if they don't guess who it is, they have to wash the dishes. Hence, Who Does the Dishes. So I did that. That's going out in the autumn. I'm going to do The Chase in September. I'm doing a programme for Channel 5 where I'm going on a narrowboat, and I have to steer a narrowboat. So that's 2 weeks of filming. Then I'm doing Panto in York at the Grand Opera House. And other bits and pieces. I'm doing Loose Women. I'm on the panel of Loose Women.
Well, I was going to ask about
this month.
Because when we all watched you on that, it did look so natural, didn't it? Like, you fit in on that show so well.
Oh, really? Well, thank you.
Is it something you would like to do?
I'd love to do it,
And you look... Yeah, it looks like a perfect fit, really, you being on that show, doesn't it?
Yeah, so they've invited me on to do one while, lots of their team are off on holiday in August. So, yes, I'm doing that on the 22nd of August. It's a Monday.
Oh, we'll Sky Plus that.
Yeah, so I'm doing that. And then, things are coming in all the time. But at the moment, I'm only sort of 4.5 months down the line. I'm just adjusting to a life without Paul. And some days I cope well, and other days it's not that I ever completely fall to pieces, but I have my emotional moments where I really need to think about him. And so I don't want to push myself too much. I'm not ready for that yet. I'm just seeing at the moment all the things that have come in that I've done, I've enjoyed. So I don't want to fill my diary with stuff that I'm thinking, actually I don't want to go out and do that job today. So, where I live, I've got friends all in this area. I've been going out on the boat, going out on friends' boats. They invite me in to dinner. My mum comes and stays every other week or so for a couple of days. My sister's been staying. I go up and see Paul's sons. So I'm just quite enjoying the pace that I've got. I've still got quite a lot of stuff to sort out administration-wise. So I need to give myself time to do that. And then next year, I have got plans in my head of things I'd like to do, but I don't want to push them yet. Yeah. I'm just slowly pulling some information together, of putting some talks together and stuff, but I haven't got time to, and I don't feel it's the right time yet to throw myself into it.
Yeah. When Paul died, there was so much love aimed at you both. And I know, because I'm in the magic world myself, that here's one thing I've never heard is a bad word about you.
Well,
everybody always says what a lovely person you are, and there was so much, everyone was thinking of you. I think I'm asking and hoping the answer is, but please keep in touch with the magic world, because we all love you and adore you.
Thank you.
Is it something you'll hope to do, keep in the magic world?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure at some point in the future, when I'm strong enough, I will put together some talks about Paul's life and our life together, and tell other stories that obviously we haven't got time on your podcast to talk about, and different things and jokes that he played during shows and things, and people we met, and things of the times he spent with Sammy Davis Jr. and all sorts of things that happened, which I think people probably like to know about, and magically, and I do love the magic world and the magic fraternity, and I've got so many friends in the magic world, and I do love magic, even though at the moment I think I probably will perform some magic in the future. I've just been reading up again about the magic square because I performed that years ago, and I'm thinking of putting that into a talk. So, like you asked me earlier, but are there things you do enjoy performing? Yes, I do. I can't see myself doing a magic act. I was a part of an act, and I don't feel it would be right for me to do it on my own. But I can see it being a part of my life in a different way.
Yeah. Debbie, this has been an amazing afternoon. Thank you so much for being so honest and just so great and so interesting. So sincerely, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Don't turn the podcast off. Don't turn it off. Don't turn it off just yet. Okay, hang on. Hold your horses. You need to listen to me before we wrap this thing up, okay? Because after the recording of this podcast finished, something hit me which you need to hear. You've just heard Debbie's story yourself, how she started as a dancer and then she went on to work with Paul Daniels. Now, the dancing bit's really interesting because she worked with the very best people, the Royal Ballet School, and they're really tough on their dancers. So Debbie learnt from the very best people in the world how to move on stage, how to stand still on stage, how to take a bow, how to acknowledge the audience. And then she went on to work with the greatest magician this country has ever produced. And in the process of doing that, she also worked with all of the other great acts in the world too. Does it remind you of anyone? I'll tell you who it reminds me of. Joni Spina. Joni, you will remember, sadly no longer with us, but Joni Spina was a dancer for David Copperfield and then became his choreographer, and then after she finished working with Copperfield, she became an incredible consultant for other magicians. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you really missed out. When Joni was alive, she used to write a monthly column in Magic magazine, and if you got it on the iPad, you could see her work in action. Every month she would critique an act. It was incredible. It's a digital world. I'm sure they're still available if you go to the Magic magazine website. And Joni would sit down and critique an act and would improve it in literally minutes. Well, Debbie could do the same thing today for magicians who are working today. Whether you've got a 2-hour act, or you're in an ensemble magic show, or you've got a 3-minute act, whether you work on cruise ships or in theatres, or Debbie has the skills, the experience and the knowledge to improve any magic act because of what she's been doing for the last 30 years. I think she'd be an amazing consultant. As is always the case on this podcast, I'm 100% right on this. I'm definitely right. Anyway, I wish Debbie the very best of luck on Loose Women on Monday. Make sure you Sky Plus it, show your support. Professional magicians out there, you can watch it live because it's Monday lunchtime. You're not going to be working, you're just going to be sat at the house, so you can watch it live. Anyway, it's time for me to ride off into the sunset and wrap this podcast up. I sincerely appreciate you listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. This has been one of my favourite episodes to ever record, and I'll never forget going back to Paul and Debbie's house to record it. Thank you so much, Debbie, for your time and for chatting to me. Don't panic, everybody. The Magicians Podcast is back again next Friday for another brand new episode. I'm Richard Young. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.